Well, I started um, studying art in Sheffield in 1974 as a painter, and then stopped painting after 6 weeks because I discovered the film department, the video department, the photography department, and decided that I wanted to reach a wider audience than a gallery. um, uh, I started out making documentary films in college, also video art, of course, but we were working on half-inch black and white Sony Portapacks with a 1-inch editor, which you had to actually press a button to make the cut and use a stopwatch because there was no time code. But it did quite well, and after that I moved into community arts. I got a fellowship at via West Midlands Arts in a community arts centre in Telford, which was terrible. Everybody was sick because of the management structure, the work culture. And then that was organised through the British Film Institute. And the BFI suggested in 1981 I apply for a job setting up and running a new video workshop in Luton at 33 Arts Centre. And I got the job. My first job was to raise the money to keep paying myself and raise money for equipment, which I did. And we had a 3-machine U-matic edit suite, a little vision mixer, a little sound mixer, and 3 cameras, and that was it. And apart from running training courses for the general public or women's groups, activist groups, a couple of young guys came to me, well, they weren't that young, they were the same age, from London, came to say that they had they were getting frustrated with the mainstream news media. And this was the time when Margaret Thatcher was at her peak of evilness. We had the miners' strike, and television news was just absolutely biased in Thatcher's favour and against the working class, basically. So we thought, we need to do something different. And there was already a very active independent film culture. But the films they were making were extremely long, very tedious, very boring, and nobody really wanted to watch them unless you were probably part of the film. So we decided we need to go more in the direction of MTV and gave ourselves a kind of set of rules, which was that whatever topic we're dealing with, it shouldn't be longer than 3 minutes. It should involve music heavily, and it should be fun, visually creative, and different. But we didn't know what different meant. The limitations of 1-inch C format with its 8 fields colour burst syncing. 8 fields is 4 frames. 4 frames is like nearly a fifth of a second. So that if you're doing very, very fine cuts that depend really on hitting exactly that frame, you couldn't do it on 1-inch back then. The only way was to go via Betacam, because Betacam wasn't sending out these pulses as such, as far as I understand it. I'm not an engineer. I built studios, but I'm not an engineer. So in 1974, Guerrilla Tapes made Death Valley Days. 1987, Invisible Television, commissioned by Channel 4. In between times, we also produced short segments for the media show, also Channel 4, and a couple of other things. But we were still hailed as being the inventors of scratch video. And we knew that we weren't. Actually, our greatest hero, was John Heartfield, Helmut Herzfeld, the German Dadaist and political photomontage, anti-fascist photomontage artist, whose work had impressed me when I was 10 years old. Just wow, how you can take 2 one image element, another image element, put them together, and you have a completely third meaning, which can be open to interpretation, but it can also make a very clear statement without actually stating that statement. Does weird things in your head. So it just happened to be 91, happened to be John Heartfield's 100th birthday. So there was already a lot of interest. And I suggested to Channel 4 and the British Film Institute that we make a half hour or a bit less, just kind of celebration of John Heartfield, a bit of an analysis of what he did and how he did it in our style. And Channel 4 didn't really have that much money. The BFI said they could put £10,000 in. Sorry, £10,000. It's nothing. Artie promised to, said they were interested in screening it as well. But so with a very, the BFI had at that time a new directors scheme, actually intended for very young people. I wasn't that young anymore, but they said no, we could get this 10,000 from the new directors scheme, and that would just about keep one or two of us able to work on it, but would in no way would it cover the technical costs of edit suites, cameras, everything. And first I had to make sure that we were allowed to make this film. I had to go to Berlin, East Berlin, because this was before the fall of the wall. That was in 1987 when I first came over from London to Berlin, which was the East Berlin Academy of Arts. In West Berlin there was a West Berlin Academy of Arts, which was just called Akademie der Künste, or without the Zu Berlin. And the archivist was fantastic. Thank heavens he's still working there. But the archivist governing John Heartfield's legacy, Michael Kreiser, we got on quite well after a pretty difficult start, because I arrived unannounced and I rang the bell, knocked on the door, which was gated and bolted, because they didn't answer my calls or my letters or anything. So I thought, sod it, I'll just go over there and say hello. That set the cat among the pigeons, because the Stasi didn't like foreigners coming in and knocking on officialdom's doors. And I had to wait outside for about 20 minutes while inside, I learned afterwards, inside all hell broke loose, saying, who's going to deal with this fucking dangerous Englishman? Sorry, fucking, can I say fucking? Okay, thank you. Who's going to deal with this Englishman? And Michael Kreiser got the job, and we're still very good friends. And he said, yeah, we can have the rights to make the film, but we'll have to pay. And that was interesting as well with the old GDR system. All creative rights were handled by a central office, copyright office. And I said, okay, how much is it going to cost? Because I knew how much rights cost in the West. And they said, 200 West marks. I thought, wow, that's a deal. Okay, good. Sign the contract. But by the time we'd actually finished the film and we were clearing up all the paperwork, the wall had fallen and the GDR didn't exist anymore. So actually we never ever paid those rights for Heartfield's pictures. Another little anecdote. Okay. Yeah, John Heartfield was exiled. Well, he went into exile. He was forced out of forced to leave Berlin. Basically, the first day the Nazis took power, went to Prague, and then of course the Nazis marched into Prague. It was obvious, So he went to London, where he was initially interned as an enemy alien, even though he was clearly anti-fascist, and worked in London for a while for Picture Post and other magazines, designing book covers, etc. And when the war was over, a couple of years after the war was over, he returned not to West Berlin but to East Berlin, and proudly, as the proud communist he was, worked hard to re-establish himself in the East, which was very difficult because he'd stayed out of Germany too long. He came back too late, so he was suspicious for the Stasi. But it's around the end of our film about him, Zygosis, John Heartfield and the Political Image, we show one of his montages about the wall, about East and West Berlin, and it's a picture of a frog jumping over a red and white, it's a barrier bar, and on the other side, the western side, there's a snake. And the title, and it's obviously the frog is leaping into the snake's jaws, and the title is Ich bin so frei, which basically translates as I am so free. The frog could be saying, but the snake could be saying it as well. As I'll help myself. So that's right at the end of our film about Heartfield. And the Berlin Wall fell while we were making the film. So that was kind of weird. Very, very weird. The problem we had with making Zygosis was finding somewhere to edit that basically didn't cost any money. And I, by chance, early 1988, I think, I was at a video festival in West Berlin and bumped into a guy called Uli Plank, an amazingly talented TV guy, really, artist and technician and cameraman and everything. And he said, hey, "Oh yeah, you're Gavin with Invisible Television and Zygosis and Guerrilla Tapes." And I said, "Yeah. And what are you up to?" I said, "Well, want to make a film about John Heartfield, but we don't have anywhere to edit." He said, "Oh, well, that's not a problem. We've just set up a little group called Art Plus Com. You'll have to come around and say hello. We're very young, very fresh, just starting work. Collection of architects, artists, musicians, designers, complete, completely eclectic group, and that they were an association, not a commercial operation at that time, and that part of their brief was to help support artists who need technological facilities." So I went and said hello, and they immediately said, "Yeah, you can use our gear, but it looks like you're going to be using it for a long time and intensively." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, okay, let's do a deal. Gavin, you can use our equipment, but you have to make films for us." So that's when I started making promotional videos for Artcom themselves, and also working very specifically with the founders, basically, of Artcom. For example, Monica Fleischmann, and I always want to say Richard because we call it Monica and Dicky, but actually Monica Fleischmann and Wolfgang Strauss, and Joachim Sauter, who unfortunately recently passed away. But Monica did a lot of work with Monica and Dicky and Joachim, helping them make the videos of their projects. So this is an excerpt from a film I was producing for National Geographic Channel 2006 about the so-called secret recording of Hitler's voice, which happened in Finland on the occasion of Marshal Mannerheim's 75th birthday, where Hitler paid a visit. And after the official radio broadcast, the sound technician left the tape running while Hitler was just having fun holding monologues with some of his generals and some of the Finnish generals, and just talking off the cuff. And it's the only recording. The film's about that, but what interested me was to analyse the Deutsche Wochenschau, the German newsreel presentation of Hitler arriving.
This Nazi newsreel documented the historic visit, and the making of this newsreel shows just how carefully Hitler's public image was controlled. Here, as Finland's President Reedy greets Hitler, two men carrying equipment run into frame and out again. 2 seconds later, two Finnish cameramen enter. What this film cleverly conceals is that when Hitler landed in Finland, his plane narrowly missed hitting a factory chimney, braking so hard on landing that one wheel caught fire. This Finnish camera crew captured this burning tire, a tire blazing immediately below the fuel tanks. The German cameraman couldn't wait as Hitler sat under a time bomb, so he films as Hitler climbs down through the smoke. Unlike the choreographed landing in The Triumph of the Will, this farcical landing has to be rescued in the film cutting room. These extras are not carrying cameras, they are carrying fire extinguishers. This is a classic example of how Hitler's image was manipulated, how nothing would compromise what would today be called a photo op. Hitler has to see and smell smoke from this burning rubber, but he pretends it isn't happening. He maintains his focus on his image and his mission, and that mission was about to begin.
You can't trust anything today. You can't trust the news, which is always, which is never impartial. Every cameraman, every journalist has a position. The editors in the stations have their positions. The owners of the TV companies have their political positions, moral positions. So, you know, I learned probably the first lesson I learned when I started making video documentaries as a student was there's no such thing as impartiality. Forget it. It's much better to take a position and state the position clearly so that everybody knows where you're coming from. And they can disagree with you, that doesn't matter. They can agree with you, that's great. But never try and be impartial, because you're playing into the hands of the enemy if you are pretending to be impartial, and giving platforms to people who shouldn't necessarily be given those platforms. But nowadays, really, with deep fake, not even deep fake, there's such a plethora of media opinions and media product that it's absolutely impossible to see the wood for the trees, or the trees for the wood, for that matter. So I don't trust anything I see on TV or online, especially not online. I almost miss the days when those deepfake, artificial intelligence options were simply not there. And if you did manipulate a picture, it was always kind of visible. You could see the stitches, you could see the elastoplast, you could see what's been scrubbed out. Those days are long, long, long gone. It's a dangerous world. in art school in Sheffield, where I learned photography, it was a great department. It was a rule when we were out shooting 35mm photos. When we printed, we always printed with a black frame, which is the edge of the image all the way around, so that it's proof that the image was not cropped, that the whole image is there, and that's what we documented. Nowadays, you don't see black framed images anymore because there is no black frame to a digital image. One of the things that I first did, I think, at Art+Com, because we were doing such a lot of architectural and city planning analysis, and also producing ideas and concepts, of course, which I was documenting. I often had the challenge of having an archive photograph and then shooting video from exactly the same position as the camera back then, maybe over 100 years ago, which was at that time pretty tricky because we didn't have a portable vision mixer or image player. So that was extremely analog, and I came up with the idea of making a transparency print of the archive photograph, printed exactly the same size as a small monitor screen, and then tape that to the monitor screen, feed my camera into it, and then I just have to move the camera so that the images match. Okay, I've got the wrong lens on, have to change the lens. But generally in the history of photography, lenses have been pretty standard. 35mm, full frame lenses, prime lenses, 20, 24, 35, 50, 75, 80, whatever. Zoom lenses can be tricky because they have different levels of barrel distortion at wide angle. But it worked fairly well, and I by the time, back in the late 80s, early 90s, with Art+Com, with this technique, which also I've used in quite a lot of my American productions, or where I've worked for American productions, and sometimes it works really well.
What we have at Auschwitz is the presence of absence. In other words, you feel the absence of the people who were there. You have a much greater sense at Birkenau of the killers than you do of their victims. Auschwitz is a place of ghosts. We only show you a semblance of the shadows because the very reality of what happened could overwhelm everything, and we couldn't face it, so we show you a glimpse into the shadow. And we trust the viewer, we trust the audience, we trust all of us to add to the glimpse that we're providing and give you a little bit more. There is Anne Frank, the icon. There's Anne Frank as one of 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust. The world will never know what was lost and who was lost when these children were murdered. The future was shut down for them.
We were perhaps more mature than normally would be, so we were all friends.
The total number of German personnel in the Netherlands was lower than 1,000, and they commanded far over 100,000 Dutch civil servants.
People started to think what will happen and started to go into hiding.
Other concentration camps were slave labor camps. There then was one genre of concentration camps that had one and only one function, and that was a death camp.
I have to confess I didn't do the movement, but that was the idea. I just did the matching because all the editing for these shows happened in Los Angeles, of course. But I still find it very powerful to see how little has changed in the world since the Second World War and earlier. It always kind of gives me the creeps in a positive way. And I just noticed that I got the date wrong. Sorry. I just need to correct that. Okay. Nobody's perfect. Because we're talking about primarily about technique, analog versus digital and stuff. They're documentaries, you know, and I haven't done the editing on most of them. I've very often done pre-editing, then sent a sort of edit sketch to the online editors, the avid editors in Los Angeles. But it's editing's a long process for a 1 hour or 2 hour documentary, and it evolves. So, as I say, quite often I'll do a sketch of a sequence, send it to them, they'll improve it, send it back to me. But basically, throughout most of the films where I was supervising producer, a field producer, and cameraman usually, basically I was the edit supervisor, even if I wasn't pressing the buttons. And that's the beautiful thing about the digital age, is that hop on a Zoom, so open it in another window, not sure I like that, okay, tweak it a bit, so it doesn't really matter where we are. And I think that's going to help with creativity in general in the future anyway. That doesn't matter where you are. It's just that one side or the other gets sleepless nights because of the time zones. A friend of mine had a gallery just around the corner here in Kreuzberg, Berlin. And used to, because it was a very small gallery, so she only had, she said everybody had to make 20 centimetre square images. And every exhibition had a theme. And she invited me to take part in one exhibition with the theme of Heimat. What does Heimat mean to us artists? And my idea of my Heimat is it's kaputt, it's dead, it's gone, it's been destroyed by Margaret Thatcher and consecutive Tory governments. So I'll give you the picture so you can zoom into it. But there are various themes here. There's Thatcher is sitting in a ditch which is full of musical instruments, especially folk music instruments, Irish instruments. She hated the Irish. At the bottom, there's a row of cameras, old cameras, new cameras, because she's just against art. Then there's painting art here. Actually, that's another montage from me, which we'll look at in a minute. That's a painting by me. So, like, conventional art, painting, is also on the trash heap. Stonehenge is full of large statues, so stone to stone. Amongst the wreckage here, there are miners' helmets, reference to the miners' strike. This can't think what they're called, Bagger in German. This is Cameron, the ex-Prime Minister Cameron, enjoying the scene because he would come along and carry on Thatcher's tradition. And the rest is a lot of rubbish with some nice seagulls, just to add a little bit of movement. This truck here is pushing the skeleton of an artist, by the way, because artists starve under the Conservatives. And this is full of books, so they attack literature as well. So it's full of little details of what's been destroyed in my homeland, my Heimat, or at least damaged seriously. And it's a picture you can look at for some time because there's always little details to find. And it's photoshopped, of course. I'm not sure how many levels, planes there are in this, but it's well in the several hundreds. And it's another thing. If you're making a moving montage, light doesn't really matter because, especially in our old guerrilla tapes work, we were trying to show that we were manipulating an image. Whereas in a static one image montage, all the light has to come from the right direction. Otherwise it looks wrong. So if you want it photorealistic, which I do want for images like this, then every element has to be chosen according from mostly online grabbed images. The light has to be coming from the right direction, not too hard, not too soft. So there's a large amount of hours involved in just selecting potential elements to stick in there. There are lots of little details that can go unnoticed, but Margaret Thatcher's wearing a brooch, and actually it's an Waffen SS Death's Head badge from a cap. Just so we're sure. Is anything happening? No. All right. So this is another montage made for the same gallery as the Thatcher image. The theme we were given for this exhibition was, in German, gehauen und gestochen, which can mean hit and stabbed, or it can mean tattooed and pierced. So I thought gehauen, which was hewed, relates to sculpture, stone sculpture. First stone sculpture that came to mind was Mount Rushmore, the presidents. And so, like, for a start, they're also gehauen and gestochen. He's got piercings and a tattoo. He's got piercings as well. Here too. Washington's dead. And I thought the title, the Shrine of Democracy, because they don't really give much of a shit about democracy in the rest of the world, or even about their own, if you follow the election stories. So it's basically captured potential terrorists with their Guantanamo style bags over their heads from the Vietnam War, soldier with a knife, Vietnam. That's actually a poster image from Soldier Blue, which was, I think, the first real American feature film to criticise the American Army's attacks on Native Americans. This is a black lady who's obviously being raped. Just the detail is just off screen. This is the real version. In the public version, she doesn't exist. But I'm going to be honest with you. I prefer this one. Up here we've got foreign soldiers. Here we've got a child soldier. And here we've got a skeleton. I love my skeletons. Who's just observing the scene. There are helicopters. This helicopter's just dropped this naked lady, which is something we've heard about. Here's another mother and child victim, and coming back to the helicopters, they're being controlled by another little skeleton with a remote control sitting on the hill. Here there's another little group who are again taking a hooded naked lady and about to throw her off the cliff. So I hope by now the viewer might have got the idea that of my theory is that women and children are the first victims of war. Oh, okay. African soldiers and a line of skeletons doing a goose step. But we have to zoom in to see those, which you'll do. Yeah, with invisible television and all these problems of getting from low band U-matic to via Betacam to 1-inch and the online edit suite, we took a lot of the footage that we'd done in the rough cut actually as the fine cut. So it looks like this.
Blink, 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 blink. It doesn't make sense.
It's a piss take on Koyon Iskwati. It's the Bolshoi ballet, and they're dancing absolutely in time. Goes on too long.
He's out, but I'm expecting him home for dinner at any moment. This is his sister. Oh, just a minute. I think I can hear him at the door now.
Now, for goodness sake, don't let him get away, or we'll never catch him again. Even invisible guinea pigs can bite.
No, yeah, oops, it's actually rubbish, but it was 1987. What quality do you need? 1080p? It's going to be a big file.
Doesn't matter.
61 gigs.